Alex O'Connor just released a video of why he doesn't believe in the Bible, or why do I not trust the Bible. And in this video, you can see that he is in a debate with Dinesh D'Souza. And I think this segment was very telling. There's two things in general I really want to point out. And let's add a third. I don't know what Dinesh D'Souza, his background is, but it is definitely not in theology. And I didn't see anything but the clip, the 10-minute clip that only shows Alex O'Connor. And I heavily appreciate Dinesh D'Souza, but I'm pretty sure his training isn't in Bible background, and that's important in a second. Now, he does advocate for God, but Alex did something very creative. And I also think it was just incredibly telling. And here's what he did. He was talking about the Bible is a collection of books. He goes, everybody talks about the Bible this way, like, is the Bible true? Is the Bible true? Etc. But then he breaks it down. It's like, but it's actually a collection of books. And so why don't we treat it like a collection of books? And then he says a few other things. But he comes back to this point and he's like, it's like asking, is the corpus of Shakespeare true? And wow, what a leading point. There's times as a Christian when you're listening to this and you're evaluating, you can tell that point right there would definitely have impact with the audience. And bravo, O'Connor, that was a good point, because all of a sudden you've kind of taken apart the Bible. And it's not just the Bible, it's now 66 individual books. Like, oh yeah, let's think of it like that. That kind of, diminishes the term Bible there for a second. And then you directly compare it to known works of fiction. And somebody's like, oh yeah, well, how do we know it's true? Because it was written by, so many different people. And it's got so many different facets. He mentions a lot of these facets, like it being allegorical or metaphorical or moral, etc. And he's kind of broken it down and dissected the Bible. And then he's compared it directly against Shakespeare. And anytime you compare one thing against another, it has to mull through people's minds. They've got to make some kind of instant comparison with it. But just briefly thinking about this, I think Alex revealed something. I think he revealed something he deeply knows, because he didn't compare the 66 books of Shakespeare to a 66-volume encyclopedia set, because you would know that was written by different authors. But he revealed that 66-book set was comparable to the set of works by Shakespeare, where you know that it is all one author. I think deep-seated in every atheist that you guys really do know that God wrote the Bible, and you're resisting it, and you're resisting, and you're resisting it. I get that. But it's little subtle hints like this that we can see that, you know better. You do know better. Well, the next thing that he jumps into is he points out some specific minutia in the Bible of contradictions and errors in the Bible. And he's like, Dinesh, take your pick. I've listed, I think it's 3 or 4 of these specific things. And here, just take your pick. And here is what's really interesting about that. Like, all of the points that he picked out have already been dealt with in the past. And so what would really be the point of bringing one of those up? And this is why I started by saying I don't think Dinesh D'Souza is classically trained in theology. I don't think that's where his training comes from. I don't think he studied to be a pastor. I could be terribly wrong on this, but we'll just stay with that. So why in the middle of a debate would you bring up some minutia points? Some very obscure points, some very detailed points. Well, the reason you would do that is because you would know the other side wouldn't really be prepared for that. And all of a sudden you hit them with a fine-tuning detail. It would be like going to somebody, bringing forward one of the programmers from Microsoft and saying, hey, did you know about this line of code right here? And they're like, oh, no, I didn't know about that line of code. And the reason they didn't know about it is because there's 1,000 programmers that write this code. And so with all the theologians that are out there and the 1,600 pages of information that are in Scripture, is Dinesh D'Souza going to know about this 1 or 2 points? Especially they've already been dealt with. But one of the things he mentioned was that Matthew, Mark, and Luke all talk about Jesus saying, leave your money belts behind, or don't get money for your money belts. Don't take 2 pair of sandals. Don't take this, don't take that, and don't take your staff with you. But then Mark is one of the 3 that says take your staff with you. And it totally overlooks the reality of the passage. So, number one, just because there sounds like conflicts in Scripture, and this is what atheists hang up on all the time, and I don't know why they go over these little tiny minutia points that can be reconciled. If I ask my children where they went, and they say, well, I went to McDonald's, and one says to bowling, I'm like, man, that sounds conflicting. They sure sound like they went to different locations. But then you find out, oh, we went to one first and then the other. All of these details that are brought out by like the Skeptic's Annotated Bible and whatnot, it's always little minutia that could be perspective, or in this case, it sounds like word usage. But here is the import of the text. Jesus is like, I am now sending you out to go do a task. And I want you to do it so quickly, I don't want you to take anything extra with you. That is the gist of the passage. Don't take anything extra with you. Don't get more shoes. Don't get 2 tunics. And it gets very specific here. Don't do these things. Don't get extra staves or extra staves. But it makes sense then that if you did have something immediate under your hand, that you could pick it up and go with it. And so Mark saying you could pick up your staff and go, and Jesus saying don't get more staves, both is appropriate if you put yourself in the reality of the context. I don't know why atheists get hung up on this. Why don't you find some major discrepancies? Like Jesus was here talking and there were no disciples. Or it is known that at this time half the disciples were on this side of the country and the other half were over there. We know that this disciple never existed. Find something like that instead of perspective angles. And we further know from studying the word usage of Matthew, Mark, and Luke that they all use the Greek words differently. There's 4 different words there for take up, carry, get, or procure, or provide, etc. There's 4 different ways, and they all use the terms differently. We can use the term fine 16 different ways. I can say something is good, and it is actually bad. Like if I say good riddance, or if I say that is one bad ride. I mean, that is one awesome looking hot rod. We say things opposite and opposing all the time, but it doesn't undergird the reality of what was happening there. And so I think it's very telling when you state things like, oh, this is compared to Shakespeare. Because you know that Shakespeare actually wrote all those works. You actually know that God wrote all the books of the Bible. And then you pick on little tiny details in the moment to try to make someone look bad. I think that is telling of motives. And I just want everybody to be aware of these small details.